The day I realized I was the biggest fool in the room, no one laughed. No one pointed. No one exposed me. Because the truth is far more dangerous than humiliation, it waits for you to discover it yourself. I used to believe fools were easy to spot. They were loud, careless, ignorant, obvious. I thought I stood above them, watching safely from a higher place. I was wrong. What I discovered shattered something inside me, not in a dramatic explosion, but in a slow, unbearable crack that forced me to look at a reflection I had spent years avoiding. And the most painful part, the lesson that changed my life did not come from a genius. It came from the very people I once looked down on. And it began with a notebook and a teacher who saw through me. Welcome to my YouTube channel Whisper Stories, where silence speaks. My name is Mark, and I am 50 years old. At 50, you would think pride has already broken itself against the hard walls of life. You would imagine that time humbles a man automatically, that grey hair comes packaged with wisdom, and regret comes softened with understanding. It does not. Some lessons wait patiently. They sit in the corners of your memory, quiet and unclaimed, until one day they demand to be told. This is one of those lessons. The boy who knew everything. When I was 17, I believed I was the smartest person in every room I entered. I had sharp grades, sharper opinions, and a tongue that could slice through anyone who disagreed with me. Teachers praised my intelligence, friends admired my confidence, even adults nodded approvingly when I spoke. What they did not see, what I refused to see, was that my confidence had begun to rot into arrogance. There was a man in my life who saw it clearly. His name was Mr. Rahman. He was not the loudest teacher in school, nor the most decorated. He wore simple clothes, spoke gently, and never raised his voice. While other teachers demanded respect, he commanded it without trying. I mistook his quietness for weakness. That was my first mistake. The assignment that felt like an insult. One afternoon, after I had openly mocked a classmate for asking what I considered a stupid question, Mr. Rahman asked me to stay after class. I expected praise. Instead, he handed me a notebook. "I have a task for you, Mark," he said calmly. I leaned back in my chair. "What kind of task?" "For the next 30 days, he said, "I want you to observe people you consider foolish." I laughed. "That won't be hard." "I don't doubt that," he replied, and his eyes held something that unsettled me. "Write down their mistakes, study them carefully, learn from them." I frowned. "Learn from fools?" "Yes," he said, "especially from them." I walked home irritated. It felt like punishment, almost humiliation. Why should I, the top student, waste time observing people beneath me? But pride has a weakness. It cannot resist proving itself right. So I began. The list of fools. I started with my classmates. There was Imran, who spoke without thinking. I wrote, "Talks too much, no filter." There was Salman, who trusted people too easily. I wrote, "Naive, gullible." There was Farouk, who bragged constantly about things he hadn't done. I wrote, "Insecure, seeks validation." There was even a shopkeeper near my house who argued loudly with customers. I wrote, "Short temper, no patience." Each evening I filled my notebook with observations. I felt clever, analytical, superior. But something strange began happening around the second week. When I described Imran's habit of interrupting others, I remembered how often I cut people off mid-sentence. When I wrote about Salman's blind trust, I thought about the time I had believed a rumor simply because it suited my ego. When I criticized Farouk for exaggerating stories, I felt heat rise in my face, remembering how I had embellished my own achievements just days earlier. The similarities were subtle at first, like faint cracks in a mirror. But by the third week, the cracks had grown impossible to ignore. The mirror I didn't want. One evening, I sat alone in my room, flipping through the notebook. Short temper. I remembered snapping at my younger sister because she borrowed my pen. Seeks validation. I remembered boasting about my grades just to hear admiration. No patience. I remembered mocking a classmate for learning slower than I did. The realization struck like cold water. I was not observing fools. I was observing myself. Each flaw I had written so confidently belonged partly to me. I closed the notebook and felt something unfamiliar. Shame. Not the shallow embarrassment of being caught in a mistake, but a deeper, heavier shame, the kind that makes your chest tighten. For the first time, I questioned whether my intelligence had ever truly been wisdom. The day of reckoning. On the 30th day, I returned the notebook to Mr. Rahman. He did not open it immediately. "What did you learn?" he asked. I swallowed, my throat felt dry. "I learned that I am not as different from them as I thought." He nodded as if he had been waiting for that answer. "Go on." I saw my own arrogance, I admitted quietly. I saw my impatience, my need to prove myself. I thought I was studying their mistakes, but I was studying my reflection. Mr. Rahman finally opened the notebook and skimmed a few pages. "Intelligence," he said softly, "is knowing the mistakes of others. Wisdom is recognizing them in yourself." His words settled inside me like seeds. "You see, Mark," he continued, "every person you call a fool is carrying a lesson meant for you. The moment you think you are above learning, you stop growing." I felt my pride crumble, not violently, but gently, like snow melting under sunlight. Humility hurts before it heals. Change did not happen overnight. I still felt irritation when someone spoke slowly. I still felt the urge to correct people harshly. But now I noticed it. Awareness became my teacher. When I caught myself interrupting, I stopped. When I felt tempted to brag, I stayed quiet. When someone made a mistake, I remembered how many I had hidden inside myself. It was uncomfortable at first. Humility often is. Pride feels powerful, humility feels vulnerable. But over time, vulnerability brought something pride never had: connection. People began speaking more openly around me. My sister laughed more when I was near. Friends sought my advice, not because I sounded smart, but because I listened. And listening, I discovered, was a form of respect. 50 years later. Now, at 50 years old, I look back at that notebook as the most valuable education I ever received. Life has since humbled me in ways far harsher than any classroom exercise. I have lost opportunities, I have made business mistakes, I have hurt people unintentionally, I have been wrong, spectacularly wrong. Each time, the lesson echoed the same truth Mr. Rahman planted in me. The moment you think you are above others, you are beneath your potential. I have met executives who dismissed janitors, only to later learn from those same janitors about discipline and consistency. I have seen wealthy men fail because they ignored the advice of those they considered less educated. I have witnessed families break because someone refused to admit fault. Pride isolates. Humility connects. And connection is where wisdom grows. The hardest lesson. A few years ago, I found myself correcting my own son sharply for making a careless mistake. I saw his face fall. In that instant, I saw 17-year-old Mark staring back at me, certain, critical, superior. I paused. "I'm sorry," I told him. The words felt heavy but freeing. "I'm still learning too." His surprise softened into understanding. And in that moment, I realized something powerful. Humility is not a destination you reach once. It is a habit you practice daily. What I know now. At 50, I no longer measure intelligence by how quickly someone speaks or how many facts they know. I measure it by how willing they are to admit they don't know. I have learned from children, from laborers, from strangers, from people who could barely read, from people I once might have dismissed. Every person carries a mirror. Sometimes it shows you who you could become. Sometimes it shows you who you already are. The choice is yours to look away or to learn. The moral. True wisdom does not grow from superiority. It grows from humility. The people you consider foolish may be holding the lesson you desperately need. Their mistakes are mirrors, not spectacles. When you learn to see yourself in others, especially in their flaws, you begin the journey toward genuine growth. You can learn from everyone. Even from fools. Especially from fools. And if a proud 17-year-old boy named Mark could learn that lesson, then perhaps anyone can. My name is Mark. I am 50 years old. And the smartest thing I ever did was admit I still had much to learn.